Reborn on the day my husband wanted to marry his childhood sweetheart. This time, I laughed out loud and took back every last bit of my dowry, leaving the burden of supporting the household to her. Let's begin this story. Xia Yinwei. Wanqing has been orphaned since childhood and is pure of character, unlike you, reeking of copper and haggling over every coin. Today, you will accept this secondary wife's position whether you like it or not. The man's reprimand rang through the main hall, carrying the righteous arrogance of a self-proclaimed nobleman. My lashes trembled. I clenched the handkerchief in my sleeve, my nails digging into my palm. The sharp pain instantly cleared my mind, and the acrid smell of the fire that had consumed my flesh seemed to still linger at the tip of my nose. The searing heat and suffocation had just faded, and now before my eyes stood Wei Chang's face, flawless as jade, yet carrying an air of cold-hearted ingratitude. I had truly come back to life. I had returned to the very day Wei Changza insisted on marrying his distant cousin, Lin Wanqing. Cousin. Please don't speak of cousin-in-law that way. Lin Wanqing, standing beside Wei Changza, reddened at the eyes. Her plain white gown made her look like a lotus in the wind. She bit her lower lip, tears brimming but refusing to fall, fragile enough to shatter at any moment. Cousin-in-law comes from a merchant family. Valuing profit is only natural. I am nothing but an orphan living on others' charity. How could I deserve the honor of a secondary wife? If cousin-in-law is displeased, I would rather shave my head and enter the nunnery, spending my days before the Buddha, than cause strife between my cousin and his wife. With that, she covered her face and started to flee, but Wei Changza grabbed her wrist and pulled her behind him. He turned to me, his gaze growing even more repulsed. Look at Wanqing, then look at yourself. Every day you're either calculating which shop has turned a profit or babbling about ledgers and silver. Not a trace of a noblewoman's dignity. The pristine reputation of our marquis's household will soon be ruined by a vulgar merchant's wife like you. From her seat of honor, the Marquis of Jingyan's wife idly fingered her sandalwood prayer beads and spoke slowly. Wei, I don't mean to be harsh, but you've been married into our household for 3 years without bearing a child. According to the laws of Great Qi, that already fulfills one of the 7 grounds for divorce. Now Changza only wants to take a secondary wife to share your burdens. If you keep objecting, word will spread that the Marquis's household is in turmoil, and that the Xie family has failed to raise their daughter properly. Pristine reputation. The Xie family's failure to raise their daughter. Watching these 3 well-dressed, moralizing hypocrites before me, I suppressed the cold fury rising in my chest, then suddenly clapped my hands and let out a laugh. The soft chuckle, in that dead silent hall, grew into a full, hearty laugh. Wei Changza furrowed his brow, his face darkening. Xia Yinwei, have you lost your mind? How dare you laugh so brazenly before your elders? Lin Wanqing also shrank behind him, looking at me timidly. I stopped laughing, drew my silk handkerchief, and dabbed at the corners of my eyes. My gaze swept calmly over the 3 of them. My mother-in-law is right, and the heir's words are even more so. I smoothed my sleeves and rose, my tone gentle enough to betray no emotion. I grew up in Jiangnan, surrounded by the sound of abacuses, a vulgar woman who thinks only of money. I truly fear that my copper stench might taint the pristine reputation of the Jingyan Marquis's household. Wei Changza paused, clearly not expecting me to yield without argument, nor to beg and plead. In that case, I turned to my trusted maid Jingyu. Go fetch the sandalwood box from my room. Jingyu moved quickly and soon returned with the box. In full view of the 3 of them, I opened the lock with a sharp click. Inside lay the keys to the Marquis's storehouses and the tally token that symbolized the mistress's authority over the household. Cousin, since you are pure of heart and well-versed in propriety, surely you understand the virtue of compassion, and you must know best how to manage this noble household. I pushed the box directly toward Lin Wanqing, a faint, knowing smile playing on my lips. I grant you the position of secondary wife. And not only that, today I also entrust to you the heavy responsibility of managing the household. From now on, the greetings, the comings and goings, and the daily upkeep of several hundred people, I leave it all in your capable hands. The hall fell utterly silent. Lin Wanqing's eyes flickered with barely concealed greed, that was the power over the entire Jingyan Marquis's household. but her face remained that of a frightened, humble girl, waving her hands frantically. No, no, cousin-in-law. How could this be? I've only just arrived, I cannot take away your authority. What are you doing? Though the Marquis's wife's eyes gleamed with greed, she still maintained her matriarchal poise, testing me, handing over the tally token. Surely you're not just sulking at Changza. Mother-in-law overestimates me. I curtsied flawlessly, my tone sincere. I truly believe my cousin is more suited to this than I am. I am too tainted by commerce to bear such noble responsibilities. It would be better for me to free up my time and focus on managing my own shops, so I don't stand in the way of the heir and my cousin's fairy tale romance. Wei Changza stared at me intently, searching for a hint of a ploy, but all he saw was clarity. Fine. Xia Yinwei. You said it yourself, don't you dare go back on your word. He snatched the tally token from the box and thrust it into Lin Wanqing's hands. Wanqing, since she knows her place, take it. Your mother and I will support you, you are fully entitled to manage this household. Lin Wanqing reluctantly closed her fingers around it, barely suppressing her glee. Then I shall temporarily take over for my cousin-in-law. If there's anything I don't understand, I hope she will enlighten me. Certainly. I smiled, then turned to Wei Changza. But I wonder, when do you plan to hold the wedding ceremony for your secondary wife? I'll need to prepare in advance. 3 days from now. He answered without hesitation. Wanqing deserves no less than a proper ceremony. It shall be conducted with the full rights of a primary wife, as the heir wishes. Without another glance at them, I turned and walked out of the main hall with Jingyu. The moment I stepped through the gate, the cold autumn wind brushed my face, but it couldn't cool the exhilaration in my heart. In my past life, I had been blind that very day. I had begged and pleaded to preserve this so-called bond, even dipping into my own shop's profits to fill the Marquis's coffers, just to keep Wei Changza from taking a concubine. In return, they drank my blood and sweat, and mocked me behind my back as crude and vulgar. Late into the night, I pored over ledgers, trying to salvage the last shred of dignity for this household, until exhaustion caused me to knock over a candle, and I burned to death. How utterly foolish I'd been. Madam, you're really giving the household power to that hussy. Jingyu couldn't contain herself the moment we returned to my own courtyard. I sat down on the Luohan bed, took up my teacup, and sipped the cold tea. My gaze turned icy. Why not? Is it some great treasure? The Jing'an Marquis's household has long been an empty shell. The late Marquis squandered everything. And Wei Changza is a useless gentleman who can't tell wheat from chaff. For 3 years, every silk robe, every social engagement, the livelihoods of hundreds, has been paid for by my dowry and the profits from my shops. The so-called account books are nothing but a death warrant wrapped in a facade. Jingyu, pass on my orders. I set down the teacup, and the porcelain clinked against the sandalwood table. From this moment on, seal my private storehouses and my dowry vault. Remove all private accounts belonging to the Xie family from the household's books. Send word to every Xie family shop manager in the capital. Starting today, not a single copper of our money is to go toward the Marquis's public accounts. Jingyu blinked. Then her eyes lit up with barely restrained excitement. Madam, are we abandoning them? Since they despise my copper stench. I stroked the jade bangle on my wrist. My smile cold. Let the pure and noble cousin taste the reality of a life without money. Today, I'm officially washing my hands of this thankless task of feeding a household. 3 days until the wedding. Good. Let's see how this perfect pair, who have no idea what a bowl of rice costs, manage to throw a grand ceremony without my money to back them. That night, the side gate of my courtyard was silently pushed open. Several figures in dark cloaks filed in, led by Qi Jing, the chief steward of the Xie family's shops in the capital. He lowered his hood, revealing a shrewd, weathered face. The 2 apprentices behind him set several stacks of ledgers, each half a foot thick, onto the sandalwood desk. I sat behind the desk, idly clicking an ornate golden-laid abacus. The crisp snap of beads echoed in the silent room. Have a seat, Uncle Qi. I gestured to the chair beside me, getting straight to the point. I've called you here tonight for one reason. I want to sever all of the Jing'an Marquis's household accounts. Qi Jing's hand, holding his teacup, froze. A glint of surprise flashed in his eyes, and even his usually steady voice trembled with excitement. Master, is this true? The Xie family will no longer fill the Marquis's endless pit. Not another coin. I tapped my finger on the top ledger. You and I both know how much the Xie family has poured into this bottomless pit over the past 3 years. They see me as a vulgar merchant reeking of copper, so let me act like one. Business is about profit and loss. This losing venture is over. Qi Jing rose excitedly, stroking his beard. I've been waiting for you to say this. The Jing'an Marquis household may look grand from the outside, but inside it's rotten through. The Marquis's wife insists on the finest bird's nest soup, 3 taels of silver a cup. The heir rubs elbows with scholars, hosting banquets at Tian Ranju, all on the Xie family's dime. Last month, he withdrew 5,000 taels from the accounts to buy some rare book, all marked as temporary loans. None ever repaid. Not only that, I flipped open the roster beside me. Every servant's wages, every yard of silk, every grain of rice, all of it's come from the Xie family's private accounts. Since the heir believes his pure and noble cousin can handle the task, let them carry the burden themselves. I closed the ledger, fixing Qi Jing with a stern gaze. Listen carefully, Uncle Qi. First, tomorrow morning, notify every Xie family shop, the silk merchants, the rice shops, the butchers, the charcoal sellers, that the Jing'an Marquis household will no longer be extended credit. From now on, it's cash on delivery. Second, compile a complete record of everything the Marquis has taken from our shops over the past 3 years, every item, every silver coin, any note bearing their signature or seal must be preserved. Make 2 copies, 1 public, 1 private. I intend to collect this debt, with interest. Qi Jing nodded, taking notes, his eyes full of admiration. You're as decisive as the old master himself, but with our money withdrawn. What about the household servants? That brings me to the third matter. I turned to Jingyu. Jingyu, take the tally token and gather all the 120 maids, matrons, and young servants I brought from Jiangnan. At dawn tomorrow, they are to leave their posts immediately. Jingyu's eyes sparkled. I understand. The kitchen matron, the purchasing manager, the storehouse guards, they're all ours. How shall we place them? Say that the Xia family's manors on the outskirts are undergoing inventory and repairs and need extra hands. I lifted my teacup and skimmed the leaves from the surface. Let them hand over their duties to Lin Wanqing. If she asks, tell her, Xia Yunwei's people are not worthy of serving a pure and noble mistress. Any vacancies left behind, she can fill with her own trusted aides. Jingyu covered her mouth, stifling a laugh. Madam, your move is brilliant. Let's see how that delicate Miss Lin manages an empty account book with an abacus. The money is cut off, and the people are withdrawn. I turned to Qi Jing, my tone growing serious. Uncle Qi, the money we save must not sit idle in storehouses. I've looked into the water transport business at Tongzhou docks south of the city. With the government cracking down on salt and iron, several large firms are pulling back. This is the perfect time for the Xie family to enter the market. Qi Jing straightened, slipping into his role as chief steward. Master, you have a keen eye. I've also been watching the Tongzhou docks. If we can secure those 2 warehouses, our silk and tea from the south can enter the capital at 30% less cost. Then go ahead. My fingertip tapped lightly on the desk, my eyes gleaming with ambition and foresight. Use the money that would have gone to the Marquis to buy those properties. The Xie family won't rely on marriage to the powerful, only on hard-earned silver. I want half the shops on the capital's 72 main streets to bear the Xie family name. Qi Jing bowed deeply. I will not fail you. After they left, the night deepened. I walked to the window and pushed open the carved wooden frame. The cold autumn wind rushed in, scattering my drowsiness. The Jing'an Marquis household still slept in the quiet darkness. Wei Chengze was probably whispering sweet nothings to Lin Wanqing, dreaming of their grand ceremony in 3 days. The Marquis's wife was likely counting her imaginary noble honors in her dreams. They had no idea that tonight, the very lifeblood of their century-old household had been cut off at the root. From what I knew, the public accounts held barely 12 taels of silver, not even enough to buy the ginseng and bird's nest that the dowager would need tomorrow. Madam, it's late, rest now. Jingyu draped a fox fur cloak over my shoulders, whispering, there's bound to be quite a show tomorrow. I pulled the cloak tighter and turned toward the bed. Yes, time to rest. I'll need my energy to watch them scramble. The next morning, before dawn had fully broken, I was awakened by distant commotion from the front courtyard. Jingyu entered briskly with a basin of water, barely containing her glee. Madam, you're awake. The commotion has begun. I sat up, pressing a warm cloth to my face. What is it, the rice merchants demanding payment, or the butchers refusing to sell meat? Both. Jingyu wrung out the cloth, her voice crisp. This morning, the newly appointed purchasing steward went to fetch meat, and the butcher said, clear the old debts first, or not even a pig's hair leaves my shop. The steward went to the accounts office for silver, but our accountant had packed up last night to head to the manors. Now the key is held by a young maid from Miss Lin's side. She opened the cash box. You'll never guess what was inside, just a few bits of shabby silver. I combed my hair, smiling faintly. And where is Miss Lin now? Miss Lin is weeping in the main hall. Jingyu said with a sneer. The kitchen matrons are demanding rice to cook breakfast for the old mistress and the heir. Miss Lin had no choice but to pull a gold hairpin from her own bun and send a servant to pawn it for some silver. But the steward, bless his heart, just had to announce to everyone. So the Grand Marquis's household has sunk to pawning the mistress's jewelry just to buy rice. I laughed softly, placing my comb on the dressing table. It's only the first day, and they haven't even had breakfast. Wei Chengza, your precious noble principles, your lofty, otherworldly life, how many hours can it survive the reality of rice and oil? Let's go. I rose, letting Jingyu fasten my gold-threaded clasp. We'll pay our respects to grandmother in the Hall of Longevity. Today's breakfast promises to be quite eventful. The underfloor heating in the Hall of Longevity was weak, carrying the faint chill of early winter. As I entered, I found my mother-in-law seated at the head of the 8 immortal table, holding a blue and white porcelain bowl, her brow deeply furrowed. Wei Chengza and Lin Wanqing sat below her, the atmosphere thick with tension. Is this swill fit for human consumption? The Marquis's wife slammed the bowl onto the table, splattering a few drops of watery rice congee. Where is my premium bird's nest soup? Not even a proper braised goose claw on this table, only pickled vegetables. Is this how you honor your elders? Lin Wanqing, who had been standing by to serve, had dark circles under her eyes. Clearly she'd been up all night with the empty account books. At the scolding, tears immediately welled up, and she knelt pitifully. Aunt, please don't be angry. It's not that I'm unfilial, it's just that the household accounts can't even scrape together the silver for today's meat. This rice was bought only after I pawned my own gold hairpin. The Marquis's wife gasped. Wei Chengza looked stunned. Nonsense. She raised her voice, incredulous. How could the Jingyan Marquis's household lack money for groceries? When Yunwei managed the household, we never wanted for anything. At this, all three turned their eyes to me, who had just crossed the threshold. Lin Wanqing, grasping at a lifeline, looked at me with tearful reproach. Cousin-in-law, when you handed over the accounts yesterday, I found only 12 taels of silver in the public coffers. I'm new here and don't know the rules, I must ask. Have you perhaps misappropriated the household funds? What a convenient accusation. I took my seat beside Wei Chengza. As Jingyu poured me tea, I slowly skimmed the leaves from the surface, then laughed lightly. Cousin, you clearly don't understand the hardships of a mistress. The Marquis's household has neither fertile fields nor profitable industries. The late Marquis lived on a meager government salary. The heir, in his noble pursuits, casually rewards servants with 10 taels of silver. My mother-in-law's daily bird's nest soup costs 30 taels per tael. Do the math. Cousin, the household's annual income is a few thousand taels, but its expenses run to tens of thousands. The 12 taels in the account were a lucky number I left behind on purpose. Wei Cheng's face stiffened, but he clung to his dignity. What do you mean by that? Are you saying our household has been living off your dowry? Don't worry, my lord. I wouldn't dare to be so disrespectful. I set down my cup and met his gaze calmly. It's just that in past years, When my family's shops happened to do well, we contributed some silver to the household. Now that I've handed over the household reins, I wouldn't want to taint the heir and cousin's purity with the Xie family's vulgar copper stench. You, Wei Changza, choked by my barbed words, flushed red and threw up his sleeve. It's only money, nothing worth such petty squabbling. Wan Qing, don't mind her. This silver, Wei Changza, a man of 7 feet, can surely come up with it. Lin Wanqing looked at him with adoring eyes. Cousin is so noble. I knew you'd find a way. Before their touching scene could play out, a clatter of hurried footsteps sounded outside. The household steward burst in, panting, and fell to his knees. My lord, madam, it's bad. The proprietor of Splendid Brocade has blocked our side gate with his men. Wei Changza frowned. Splendid Brocade. What do they want? Give them 2 strings of cash and send them off. We can't. The steward wrung his hands. It's about Miss Lin's wedding dress, the one she ordered. The proprietor says she ordered the full 100 sons and grandsons gold-threaded gown, plus the gold phoenix sand-dragon headdress, total cost 1,800 taels. They've delivered the goods, but they won't release them without the silver, and they're outside shouting. Shouting what? The Marquis's wife demanded. The steward swallowed, screwed his eyes shut, and delivered the news like a man headed for execution. They're saying, if the Jing'an Marquis's household can't afford a secondary wife's wedding dress, they shouldn't pretend to be grand. They might as well buy 2 feet of red cloth and make do. The servants from all the neighboring households are gathered at the side gate, watching the spectacle. The hall went dead silent. I paused, teacup in hand, barely suppressing a smile. In my past life, Lin Wanqing had tearfully begged for a proper wedding, and Wei Changza, feeling sorry for her, had forced me to pay for this very outfit. Now that I'd stepped back, the blow had landed squarely on their own heads. The Marquis's wife's face turned ashen, her eyes like knives. 1,800 taels. A secondary wife, daring to wear gold-threaded robes. I can't even get a bowl of thick congee today. But you're so generous, spending nearly 2,000 taels at once. Lin Wanqing, pale with fright, fell to her knees, stammering excuses. Aunt, please hear me. It was my cousin who said I shouldn't be slighted, that everything should be done as for a primary wife. That's why I ordered from Splendid Brocade. Wei Changza was mortified. He had always prided himself on his noble disdain for money, his love of reputation. Now, being hounded for payment by a merchant, with all the neighbors watching, was worse than a slap in the face. Tell the proprietor the dress is not wanted. He roared through gritted teeth. Tell him to get out of the Marquis's household at once. My lord, we can't. The steward was nearly in tears. The dress was custom-made. The proprietor has declared that if we don't pay, he'll go to the courts and sue us for bullying merchants. If it goes to court, your reputation will be utterly destroyed. Wei Changza staggered and collapsed into his chair, all color draining from his face. He turned instinctively toward me, his gaze tangled with struggle, embarrassment, and the long-ingrained habit of looking to me for money. In my past life, whenever he made that face, I would relent and fix everything for him. This time, I feigned ignorance. I rose gracefully, smoothing the embroidered plum blossoms on my skirt, my tone warm. Cousin has taken over the household, surely she has a plan for this oversight. I'm just a retired idler now. I won't get in the way. My lord, cousin, please do take your time sorting out this mess. Under Wei Changza's humiliated stare and Lin Wanqing's despairing sobs, I strode out of the Hall of Longevity with Jingyu. The cold wind swept over me, and I felt light and free. Back in my courtyard, the parrot under the eaves preened idly. Compared to the chaos at the front, this was a peaceful haven. Half an hour later, Jingyu burst in, skirts hiked, barely observing propriety. Madam, I've heard all about it. The front hall's little drama has finally wound down. I leaned against my pillow, perusing the Tongzhou doc deeds Qi Jing had sent, and didn't even look up. How did the heir resolve it? With no silver to hand. Jingyu laughed, nearly doubled over. The heir was forced to send his page to pawn his treasured inkstone and the rare book Spring Outing Scroll at the pawnshop. Desperate for cash, the pawnbroker drove a hard bargain. Both treasures fetched only 1,500 taels. The remaining 300 came from the Marquis's wife's private purse. I snorted, carefully tucking the deeds away. That inkstone Wei Changza had treasured above all, in my past life. He'd frown if I so much as glanced at it, calling me uncultured. Now, for his pure and noble cousin, he'd cast it aside for silver. But word got out somehow. Jingyu lowered her voice, her eyes twinkling with malice. The whole capital is laughing at the Jingyan Marquis' household. They say the heir would pawn his own dignity for a beautiful smile. He was so angry he smashed his purple clay teapot, and even his look at Miss Lin has lost its former warmth. So the cracks are already showing. I said lightly, it's only the beginning. When poverty sets in, even the greatest romance crumbles. Without my money tree, their poetry and moonlight will soon be ground to dust by the daily grind. Madam, there's more. Jingyu's expression turned serious, tinged with disgust. The gatekeeper reported that Miss Lin's maid snuck a locksmith to your dowry storeroom. She was caught by our people, and had the nerve to claim she was acting on the new mistress's orders, inventorying the household's old property. My smile froze. Inventorying old property. The laws of Great Qi were strict. A wife's dowry was her private property. Even if her husband's household were reduced to penury, they had no right to touch it. Lin Wanqing must be desperate to set her sights on my vault. Tell the guards. My gaze hardened, my tone turning cold, that if anyone comes within 10 feet of my storeroom, they are to be beaten without mercy, dead or alive. I, Xia Yinwei, will bear the consequences. Yes, madam. Jingyu straightened and left with renewed energy. The room fell silent again. I took out the Tongzhou dock deeds and ran my fingers over the red official seal, a solid, reassuring weight. I walked to the window and looked out at the withered lotuses swaying in the yard. The Jingyan Marquis' household was a tree that had long rotted from within. Now, my Xia family vine would finally pull free, as soon as Uncle Qi had shifted our visible holdings to discreet investments. And we had hard evidence of their embezzlement. The divorce papers would be my final gift to Wei Changza. In my past life, I'd poured my heart into him, and all I got was a lonely desk and a fiery death. Now I knew the truth. The only thing in this world you can truly rely on is silver in your own hand. The Tongzhou warehouses were just the beginning. In 3 days, at his wedding, the real fun would begin. Let's see how Lin Wanqing, wrapped in her 1800 tail gown, would fare in a household with no food and no money, even on her wedding night. 3 days later, the Jingyan Marquis' household held its farcical secondary wife ceremony. I sat in the mistress's seat at the main hall, quietly watching the gathered guests. Thanks to the earlier spectacle at Splendid Brocade, most of the capital's nobles had come purely to gawk. And there was much to gawk at. The household accounts were empty, and Lin Wanqing had blown her budget on the dress. The kitchens couldn't even scrape together a proper feast. The grand banquet of a marquis' household featured nothing but bland vegetarian dishes and watery chicken soup, drawing concealed smirks from several noble ladies who dabbed their lips with handkerchiefs. The auspicious hour arrived. Wei Changza appeared in his dark red wedding robes, and beside him, supported by maids, Lin Wanqing wore the 1800 tail gown. The gold-threaded robe glowed in the sunlight, making the shabbiness of everything else all the more glaring. Bow to heaven and earth, the herald intoned. Hold! A thunderous voice suddenly rang from the main gate, halting the ridiculous proceedings. All heads turned as Qi Jing, chief steward of the Xie family's shops, strode into the hall with over a dozen shopkeepers from the capital. Behind them, apprentices carried 2 heavy, copper-bound rosewood chests. Wei Chang's face contorted. Qi Jing, how dare you? This is the heir's wedding. Who gave you permission to bring these vulgar merchants into the Marquis' household? Get out! Qi Jing bowed with impeccable composure, his voice clear as a bell. Congratulations to the heir. As the Xie family is connected by marriage, we naturally bring a great gift, not to celebrate, but to settle old debts. With a wave of his hand, the apprentices threw open the chests. No gleaming gold or silver greeted the guests, only ledger books and promissory notes stacked like mountains, each stamped with a crimson fingerprint. Over the past 3 years, Qi Jing declared, pulling out a handful of notes and shaking them so they crackled. The heir has spent 10,000 taels at Tian Ranju hosting his scholarly friends, 5,000 taels on rare books and paintings. The Marquis's wife has consumed bird's nest soup every day without fail. And Miss Lin has purchased gifts and jewelry. He met the assembled guests' eyes directly. Every single item was borrowed from the Xie family's shops, each with the heir's own signature and seal. The hall erupted. The guests who had just been praising the heir's noble character now exchanged whispers that pricked like needles. So the Marquis's reputation was all built on his father-in-law's silver. If they despised merchants for their copper stench, why were they so quick to borrow? Wei Chang's face flushed purple, his body swaying. He stared at me, eyes bloodshot, teeth clenched. Xia Yunwei, you dare to conspire with outsiders to humiliate me on this day. Do you care nothing for your dignity as the mistress of this household? Dignity. I finally laughed, a cold laugh. Rising slowly from my chair, I smoothed the folds of my skirt. When you took the Xie family's hard-earned silver to support your pure and noble cousin, did you think of my dignity? I stepped down, my gaze like frost as it swept over Wei Changze and the panicking Lin Wanqing. For 3 years, the Xie family has filled the Marquis's deficits to the tune of 73,600 taels of silver. Murder must be paid for with life. Debts must be repaid with silver. Before all the noble guests, family elders, and high officials today, I ask the heir to settle this debt, or I will have no choice but to take these signed deeds to the courts. Lin Wanqing's legs gave way, and she collapsed to the floor, her glorious gown now dirted with dust. She clung to Wei Changze, sobbing, "Cousin, what do we do? Where can we find 70,000 taels?" He staggered, desperation and humiliation in his eyes. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You viper, are you trying to destroy me? Do you want to end this marriage?" "You're right," I said, looking at him without a trace of the feelings I'd once had, only the satisfaction of long-awaited justice. I pulled a prepared letter from my sleeve and flung it at his hypocritical face. "I'm done with the mess of this household. Wei Changze, I want a divorce." The letter fluttered to the ground. The words, "divorce petition," burning in everyone's eyes. The paper, thin as a cicada's wing, landed on the bluestone floor like a thunderbolt. The Marquis's wife recovered first, shrieking at me. "Rebellion, utter rebellion. Since ancient times, only a husband may divorce a wife, no woman may demand it. You've violated the 7 grounds with your gossip and jealousy. Changze, write her a letter of repudiation, cast her out." "Repudiate me?" I let out a scornful laugh, taking half a step closer, my gaze like ice. "Mother-in-law, watch your words. The law of Great Qi states, anyone who embezzles a wife's dowry shall be beaten 80 strokes and stripped of their title. If the heir writes me a letter of repudiation, the moment I leave this household, I'll take these 70,000 tael promissory notes and beat the imperial drum. Let's see whether His Majesty will repudiate me, or confiscate the Jing'an Marquis's household." The Marquis's wife gasped like a strangled hen, her face draining of color as she collapsed into her maid's arms. Wei Changze stared at the divorce papers on the ground, his eyes bloodshot. At last, he shed his pretenses, his voice revealing real panic. "Yunwei, you would truly go this far? We've been husband and wife for 3 years. Would you destroy the household's reputation just because of Wanqing?" Even now, he thought it was merely jealousy. The despair and agony of the fire that had consumed me in my past life had burned away every last feeling I'd once had for him. "You're wrong, my lord. What destroyed this household is not me, but your own insatiable greed and hypocrisy." I glanced at Lin Wanqing, who had shrunk behind him. At the mention of 70,000 taels, her face was whiter than the paper. She quietly released her grip on his sleeve and edged backward, a small gesture. But it amused me. In the past, she'd adored his wealth and status. Now that his status was a crushing debt, I wondered how much of her love remained. The brush. I set the writing brush on the table. "Sign the divorce papers, and I'll give you a month to raise the money. Refuse, and the bailiffs from the court are waiting at the street corner." The patriarch of the Wei clan, who had been attending the celebration, could no longer sit idle. The clan's honor was paramount. If this matter went to court, the Wei family's officials would be ruined. He slammed his cane against the ground. Changza, have you not been shamed enough? Sign the papers and let her go. Under the patriarch's pressure and the weight of his debts, Wei Chang's hand trembled like a leaf in a gale. He closed his eyes and, with all the humiliation he could bear, signed his name and pressed his red fingerprint onto the divorce papers. I tucked the document safely into my sleeve and turned to Qi Jing. Uncle Qi, take the men to the rear courtyard. Every single item from my dowry, my entire trousseau, is to be removed from this house. Not so much as a single thread purchased by the Marquis' household is to remain. Yes, my lady. Within half an hour, my courtyard was stripped bare, even the rosewood screen I'd brought as a dowry was taken. The Marquis' wife watched her familiar treasures carried away and almost fainted from grief. Servants ran about in chaos. I stepped over the high threshold of the Jing'an Marquis' household. The autumn wind swept away the stifling air I'd endured for 3 years. This was only the first step of my plan. With a debt of 70,000 taels and the loss of Xie family support, I would see whether this fated couple could hold on to their professed true love. The first snow of winter fell fast and cold. I sat on the Luohan bed in the Xie family's warm study, idly stirring the silver charcoal in my hand warmer with brass chopsticks. Qi Jing laid a thick stack of banknotes before me. For the first time in ages, his steady face showed open satisfaction. My lady, 73,600 taels. The Wei family scraped together every last coin and paid it back in full. Where did they find so much silver? I lifted my celadone cup, skimming the surface. Jingyu, unable to contain herself, piped up. Where else? They sold their ancestral properties. After the divorce, the scandal was so big that a censor sent a memorial to the throne. Poor family governance. Moral failures. The emperor was furious and stripped Wei Changza of his title. The Marquis' wife, to settle the debt and avoid exile, pawned the family's 5-courtyard mansion in the eastern city and the remaining ancestral fields outside the capital. The once mighty Wei family now rents a drafty shack in the outer city. I laughed softly and set the cup down. Easy to go from frugality to luxury. Hard to go back. How can a perfect couple who demanded snowmelt from the Tianshan Mountains for their tea stomach common fare? I also heard there was bloodshed in that shack last night, Jingyu said, lowering her voice with undisguised contempt. Miss Lin couldn't bear the bitter cold. She took scissors to that 1800 tail gown, thinking to melt down the gold thread and flee to Yangzhou. Wei Changza caught her and flew into a rage, calling her fickle and greedy. She gave as good as she got, calling him a spineless failure who couldn't even protect his wife's dowry. In their struggle, he was pushed and fell on the stone steps. The doctor says his lower back is broken. He'll be bedridden for life. The Marquis' wife, desperate, sold Lin Wanqing to a brothel, without even a winter coat. Silence fell in the warm room, broken only by the faint crackle of charcoal. The great fire that had consumed me. Wei Chang's cold, hypocritical face, all of it finally crumbled to ash in my heart. Without the Xie family's endless wealth to shore them up, their so-called epic love had shattered like cheap porcelain against the winds of poverty. I rose and pushed open the carved window. The sharp, clean wind of the snowy day swept away the last of my past. Along the long avenue, the Xie family shop signs gleamed with gold characters against black lacquer in the winter sun. The streets hummed with life, with commerce, a vast world unbound by the walls of a noble house. In this second life, I would not be a dried-up husk, scraping for scraps in a marquis' back courtyard. The world lay before me, and only I, Xie Yinwei, would write its story. So, what do you think of this story? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your voice.